Thank you, Mr. President. And let me join colleagues in really extending our commendation and congratulations to you and your delegation on your successful presidency this month, as this is the last scheduled meeting. Mr. President, I thank Assistant Secretary General Miroslav Jancha for his sobering briefing on the grave escalation of the conflict between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. And I welcome the participation of Her Excellency Ms. Yulia Shcheredenko, Prime Minister of Ukraine, to this meeting. Sierra Leone is alarmed by reports of continuous airstrikes on heavily populated areas, particularly of Ukraine. On 27 August, there were reports of a massive airstrike involving more than 500 drones and missiles, as briefed, killed at least 23 people, including 4 children, in Kyiv and injured over 45 others, with many still feared to be trapped under rubble. The strikes damaged residential buildings, a shopping mall, and even diplomatic premises of the British Council and the European Union. This tragic episode regrettably reflects the wilder pattern of the conflict. The first half of 2025 has witnessed relentless aerial bombardments of populated areas, leaving behind death, destruction, and despair. Hospitals, schools, universities, businesses, and critical energy and water infrastructure have all been targeted. Retaliatory strikes have also caused civilian injuries and infrastructural damage inside the Russian Federation. The UN Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine reported that July 2025 registered the highest number of casualties, civilian casualties, since the early days of the conflict, with 286 civilians killed and 1,388 injured. August appears to be continuing this devastating trend. The toll since 2022 is staggering. More than 50,000 casualties alongside the displacement of over 10 million people. Millions, particularly children, now live in fear, deprived of safe shelter, quality education, and basic necessities such as clean water and electricity. More than 1,600 educational facilities have been damaged or destroyed, compounding their plight. Sierra Leone deplores the deliberate targeting of civilian and civilian infrastructure. International humanitarian law is unequivocal. Such attacks constitute war crimes. We stress that the principles of proportionality, precaution, and distinction must be fully respected. Operations near nuclear installations or other critical civilian sites are particularly unacceptable and risk catastrophic consequences. We therefore reiterate our call on the involved parties to prioritize the protection of civilians, to cease indiscriminate attacks, to refrain from military operations in and around civilian infrastructure, and to ensure humanitarian corridors are respected. Compliance with international law, including human rights law and the Geneva Conventions, is not optional. It is obligatory. We commend the ongoing humanitarian aid coordination efforts led by the United Nations Humanitarian Coordinator and facilitated by OCHA under extremely difficult circumstances. With approximately 12.7 million people in Ukraine in need of humanitarian assistance, these efforts remain indispensable. We call for the safe, sustained, and unhindered delivery of aid, particularly to those in hard-to-reach areas and close to front lines. We further emphasize the importance of sustained and flexible funding for humanitarian and recovery programs, particularly in view of the upcoming winter season. Mr. President, this conflict is not confined to the borders of Ukraine or the Russian Federation. Its ripple effects are destabilizing global economies, undermining trust in the international system and norms, and aggravating food and energy insecurity. The disruption of grains export disproportionately affected developing countries, including in Africa, driving up prices and straining vulnerable economies. Most gravely, the conflict adds to a mosaic of geopolitical issues that are eroding the very integrity of the UN Charter. If internationally recognized borders can be redrawn by force and sovereignty principle not immutable, then the foundation of global peace and security is left unprotected. For Sierra Leone, the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of state are immutable principles. To compromise them is to compromise the rules-based international legal order itself. Sierra Leone reaffirms its unwavering support for the Charter of the United Nations and its core obligations under Article 2.3 that all member states must settle disputes by peaceful means. In this spirit, we recall the Council's recent adoption of Resolution 2774, which reaffirmed that the primary purpose of the United Nations is to maintain international peace and security and to resolve disputes peacefully. It further called for a swift end to the conflict and a lasting peace between Ukraine and the Russian Federation. We also note the guidance of the General Assembly in its most recent resolution at the 11th Emergency Special Session, which underscored the urgent need to end the conflict this year. Sierra Leone aligns itself with these calls because peace must be the immediate priority. That peace, however, must be just, comprehensive, and sustainable. Only through genuine dialogue and good faith negotiations can the bloodshed end and stability return. With this in mind, and given the escalating toll of death, displacement, and destruction, the only viable path forward is through diplomacy and dialogue. We therefore support all initiatives, both within and beyond this Council, aimed at securing a stop in fighting, declaration of a pause to pave the way for a just, comprehensive, and sustainable peace. We take note of the recent confidence-building measures, including the exchange of prisoners of war, civilian detainees, and soldiers' remains, facilitated through talks in Istanbul. These are positive steps that should be built upon. We also welcome recent high-level engagement and urge that they translate into meaningful negotiations for unconditional ceasefire and eventually peace agreement. The international community, and above all this Council, must remain steadfast in its support for such efforts, supporting negotiations that address critical issues, including immutable borders, security guarantees, military capabilities, and regional stability. Resolution 2774 provides a framework, but it is the will and leadership of the member states that will determine whether peace is achieved. The stakes are too high for delay. The people of Ukraine and the Russian Federation, and indeed the wider world, deserve an end to this devastating war. Sierra Leone stands ready to work with all members of this Council and all parties concerned to ensure that leadership, goodwill, and the principles of the Charter prevail. Only then can we restore faith in international law, rebuild shattered lives, and reaffirm the UN's enduring purpose of saving succeeding generations from the scourge of war. I thank you.
Agradezco a la delegación de Sierra Leona